Our panel doesn't need much of an introduction, but I'd like to introduce for completeness Vassiliki Lazarakou, Chair of the Hellenic Capital Market Commission.
Thank you, Maria Nefeli. First of all, it is my honor to be here with you, given the high qualified audience, and it's my honor to address you regarding the capital markets. Let me give my compliments to Nikos Bornozis and Olga Bornozi for this excellent Capital Link event. And this year's theme, actually, accelerating investments for sustainable growth, is more relevant than ever, focusing on the major challenges for the future of the global economy, tackling climate crisis, enhancing sustainability, and supporting sustainable growth. So speaking specifically about Greece, I'm not going to expand regarding the issues for economy because we heard the previous panel, which had an excellent insight, gave us an excellent insight on what the Greek economy is about and which are the prospects of the Greek economy post-investment grade. So it is worth just mentioning that in a high, volatile and uncertain international environment, because of a number of geopolitical and economic factors, the Greek economy has shown very good resilience and strong growth potential. So, what about capital markets? Let's start with some comparisons, and I'm sure that Yianos Kontopoulos will give us many more numbers. So, I will start with a year that was a remarkable peak year, and that was in 2021. And I'm saying this because in 2021, we saw some of the strategic decisions that we have taken and there's some priorities that we have set as regulators being implemented as well, which we think contributed to this peak year. So in 2021, it was the first year after many years that we had 10 times over capital fundraising through the stock exchange, many years ago, plus it was the first time that we saw assets of the Greek mutual funds exceeding the assets of foreign funds. And why do I say this? Because traditionally in Greece, because of Brexit, we have seen that Greek investors, in order to safeguard their money, they were investing in foreign mutual funds. And 2021, the reverse happened. The Greek mutual funds, the assets of the Greek mutual funds were more than those of the foreign investment funds, which means that trust was again beginning to come back to the Greek economy and to the Greek investment products. Now, the next big year is the second half of 2023. We saw again that the assets in the Greek mutual funds being increasing. We see an increase like 100% since 2019, and it's about 37% from previous year. IFs have increased, not so much as the mutual funds, like 25% in 1 year. And also, for the first time, we saw IPOs in the Greek market of a Greek bank. You saw Optima Bank. That happened this year after 70 years, if I remember well the number. And also, we had the two successful placements of shares of 2 other banks, which exceeded expectations. So what about the regulatory and supervisory framework within which the capital markets operate? From the first moment of our term, back in September 2019, as I mentioned, we had some specific priorities. One of them was to assist, to contribute to modernizing the regulatory framework when we're speaking about national framework. And I'm saying this because the Greek capital markets framework, the regulatory framework, is an EU one. European Union regulations and directives are applicable in the Greek capital market. So wherever there was a national legislation, like the corporate governance, for example, we try to modernize by, let's say, providing our insight regarding the changes for the corporate governance law. And I have to say that right now, the Greek-listed companies operate under this new corporate governance framework, which is in alignment with international best practices and with the OECD principles. Also, back in 2020, we issued a lot of regulatory decisions in order to facilitate the funding through the stock exchange by eliminating bureaucracy, let's say, as much as we could, and having regulatory decisions that would ask for less documents when we wanted to have offerings, or we allowed to have the English, let's say, to receive prospectuses in English in order to assist with international public offers and with dual listings, in case we have. So as regulators, we endorse all the EU and the capital market union objectives, including sustainability, of course. We work together with other regulators in order to form the relevant framework. It is of great importance for modern businesses to plan and execute investments that promote sustainable development, but also adapt broader strategies in alignment with the ESG criteria. Why? Because ESG, which is environment, social, and governance, is about socially and environmentally responsible companies that operate on the basis of good principles and with transparency. So in this respect, we also participate in the Bureau of the OECD Corporate Governance Committee, and I'm saying this because we have contributed to the revision of the OECD principles. And that brings me to the third and final remark regarding our future work. So which are the future challenges and which is the future work? First of all, assessing whether there are more changes that need to take place as far as the corporate governance framework is concerned, on the basis specifically of the revised OECD principles. And second, in order to make sure that we endorse sustainability. The second is to further assess and further shape the framework for better disclosures on behalf of companies for sustainability purposes. And as well, we participate with other EU and international regulators in all the committees that are right now discussing all these changes for shaping, let's say, the international and the EU framework for sustainability purposes. And the third one is taking into account that the new era is technologically driven. We want to make sure that right now we let's say, promote changes regarding the digitalization era that we have in front of us. We at the Commission right now, we are working on our digital transformation, and we are going to get funds from the RRF for this purpose, but I think that all of us need to further assess which in general changes are required in order to make sure that the ecosystem changes and adapts in the new era where technology is number one. So there are many profound changes with respect to the capital market sector that are taking place right now, and I'm sure that our panel will discuss them further and analyze them. I will just say sustainability, technological innovation, fintech, new business models, supervisory convergence. And at the Commission, we are working hard for all these challenges through our own participation also in high-level bodies at the EU level and international level. Our mission is to ensure that the framework is in alignment with best practices, and we succeed in supervisory conversion. At the same time, we support Greece's financial profile in order to be fit for tomorrow's challenges at the EU and international level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vassiliki. Thank you, Vassiliki. It's very exciting to hear about all the new initiatives of the HCMC. Nicholas hasn't allowed me to say much about each speaker, but I will say that Vassiliki has played a key role in fostering the reputation of the HCMC as a market-oriented regulator, and we're grateful for that. Moving on to Yianos Kontopoulos, CEO of the Athens Exchange Group. Giano, you've played an incredible role in signaling a new era for the Athens Stock Exchange. But since you're a good sport, I'm going to ask, is it really a new era?
Okay, it almost sounded like a paid advertisement, so thank you. But you twisted it at the end. Well, look, thank you all, good morning, by the way. It's very hard to observe and understand history in the present. So when you talk about new era is a bit of a question mark. I think we should hold back a bit. I think the best we can do is get into action, and I think that should be the motto for everyone. I think Mr. Fiotakis in the previous panel said execution is the risk, so more doing, less talking is important. I think we have to look at the evidence. I think if indeed we have a new era. So let me start. The first piece of evidence is the near doubling of the size of this panel from last year. So I think that's a good start. The other part is obviously, I wouldn't say that the stock exchange has had a good performance this year. I think for me what I'm holding on to, because it's important if we're going to talk of a new phase, is the to start thinking about valuation and their indirect signals. One of them is to look at years where it has been particularly challenging for the markets, like 2022, where you had a very significant drop in international equities, roughly about 20%, and bonds at the same time dropping about 10%. And Greece was managed to eke out a very decent positive return, and it was at the top of the rankings. Most likely, we have a few more days left. We'll do the same in 2023, which is a decent year. So looking at this type of behavior, both in a very bad year and a good year, I think that's also a good potential starting point for here. Ultimately, since we are in the States, it's the economy stupid, so I don't think we need to do much work here. We need just to take advantage of how things have changed in the course of the last few years. And if indeed, again, as Mr. Fiotakis from the last panel is correct, and we're dealing with a mega cycle in Greece, so look, we just have to be present and pretend to press buttons and things will happen. It will be a new era. So I think that the part of the economic support is critical, and that's already reflected in the performance of the constituents of the stock exchange, both again in 22 and in 2023. We had record performance of profitability and a lot of other measures in terms of debt levels, in terms of cash levels, in terms of employment levels. So, the data is there, but then again, if you're going to chat with a Chinese fellow, is going to tell you, that's a bit too early to talk about a new era. So look, the other anecdotal evidence is the behavior of investors here, international investors, and I think in a very nice event with Mr. Kostopoulos here from Morgan Stanley a couple of weeks ago in London, I thought I said that in an interview, I was being trolled by an investor who was just a major investor, actually, who was telling me that about his investments in Greece, that they're exceptional. What he really likes is the fact that he is closing his books on Friday, and his major expectation is that on Monday morning things will be the same, and that gives him a lot of solace. And I just had take a double take and just make sure that he was not teasing me. But I think that's the new setup here. It's an incumbent on us, people who are part of this panel, and I've said this when I first took over at the exchange about a year and a half ago. There's very little we can do individually. This is a common effort, and I really mean that, because I can say that both in frustration and also in celebration when good things happen. Is that if we all believe in this and we do the multiple things that are in front of our eyes and we know that need change, then we should be fine. As I said before, look, I could hypnotize you for a long, long time, but we are double the size of the last panel, so I'll just say more doing, less talking. Thank you.
Thank you. Since you mentioned Konstantinos' contribution, let's move on to him. Konstantinos is head of Greece and Cyprus investment banking at Morgan Stanley. I wanted to kind of jump off one of the points Yianos made about the Morgan Stanley conference in London. What were the key messages you received in relation to foreign investment there?
Thank you, Maria Nefeli. Look, I was actually planning to use Yianos' story about the investor going back home Friday night, but I'll have to skip that. The conference this year was indeed very successful. I think that's something that came out as a message from all stakeholders, and just as a context of the numbers, we did see a sort of like 30% higher participation rate versus the previous year, which I only mention as a sign of how important Greece is becoming for the investor community, and the fact that the interest is there and it's actually real. I think the messages were also very clear and consistent as well. And if I had to put a banner under the overall messaging, would be that Greece is back. And I know that's a theme that keeps playing over the the past 12 months. It sounds repetitive, it sounds simplistic, but I just want you to all think that it takes probably a day or just an article for a country to disappear from the investors' minds, but it takes a lot of hard work and commitment for the jurisdiction to actually come back. So Greece is back. People seem to be facing less and less barriers to commit serious capital into the country, and I would say overall the whole system is extremely happy, not just with the consistency that they see and what they perceive as a sustainable growth, but also the fact that there is a fine balance maintained between the messaging but the actual delivery of the stakeholders, which is very important to actually happen, as gradually, if this is not the case, the initial momentum and excitement can actually backfire. The country is back to investment grade. 2024 will probably be the time that we'll see Greece moving back to developed market status. So obviously all these messages can only tell us that people will keep the country on their watch list. So to summarize, excitement is back. Everyone wants to see more coming out of the jurisdiction. But at the same time, expectations are also now very high, which I think is something that we should all keep our focus, because Greece is not being seen now as just a recovery story, but is actually an exciting opportunity for everyone that is sort of like being put on par with opportunities on other developed markets. Finally, most investors have highlighted the fact that Greece is outperforming versus other EU jurisdictions. Obviously, this is extremely flattering, but also shows and highlights the fact that we're going to have a strong competition going forward in order to keep attracting this inward investment to the country. So let's all keep doing what we're doing, and hopefully, the only way is up, at least for the foreseeable future.
Thanks, Konstantinos. We're hearing a very positive message from both Konstantinos and Yianos. Giuseppe, I'm wondering, we're hearing all of this positivity, but our starting point was quite low after more than a decade in financial crisis. Is this comeback inevitable and circumstantial, or do you think it's sustainable?
Good morning, everybody. Look, the starting point was indeed very low. We had a more than 10 years Greek crisis, where capital controls, where the Athens stock exchange closed for more than a month. The bank instead of being recapitalized, so yeah, it was low. But the arrival of the government that we had for now 4 or 5 years changed everything. And from 2019, we've seen a huge effort in making political change, brought stability, return to normality, and an increase in direct foreign investment in Greece. So all this helped a lot, and I think 2023 was the culmination of this effort. After many, many years, we've seen that a strong capital market. We saw 3 IPOs, 2 capital increases, and the benchmark NBG transaction of over $1 billion. So things are working to the right direction, and that's a very positive statement. And I think that the solid demand for Greek equity, and after the NBG transaction, obviously, shows that there is a very strong interest from foreign investors for Greek equity. It shows that Greek banks have turned the corner, and they have. We are seeing strong profitability, high capital ratios. So all this is very in favor of the market. And we've also seen an increase in the average daily volume of the market by more than 50% between 2022 and 2023. So we believe that in the short and even longer term, the trend is positive for the market. We have also I believe again, landmark transaction of the Athens International Airport in 24. So again, this is something that will help the market. And we are very positive that there is going to be a continuation of this pipeline in the market, and that we're going to see 2024 similar or even better than 23.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Since you've mentioned the NBG transaction, I think I have to move on to Dimitris Kofitsas, Executive Director at Goldman and Head of Greece Investment Banking Coverage and Financing. Dimitri, you were involved in the NBG transaction that Giuseppe mentioned. We also had the pleasure to be involved alongside each other in the Hellenic Energy placement. What are your key learnings from these recent transactions?
Thank you, Maria. So look, I think taking a step back, there was two transactions that were quite important for the stock exchange. The first one was a $1 billion+ offering by HFSF. The structure was quite innovative because NBG had to run all the preparation through the prospectus in English that HCMC approved in a very timely manner, and then we followed basically with extensive investor marketing in London and New York, and obviously before launch, almost the book was covered. So basically, it was very well followed by the investor community across all global cities. Look, and the demand, $8.5 billion for a $1 billion book, a $1 billion transaction, and only 2.5% discount, which is pretty unique. And it's the first time, if you're taking a step back, so we had 3 major waves in Greece on capital, basically, transactions. It was the 13 to 15, the bank recaps. 15 to 21 was no activity because of the crisis. 21 we had basically PPC, Piraeus, and Alpha basically raised $4 billion. And now NBG, we think, is the milestone to reopen the equity market. Now, NBG then paved the way for Hellenic Energy. Very, very different company, different sector, oil and gas, refining, much more tricky for global investors, and very liquid stock. So basically, we placed $230 million in the market ABO, which represented 6% of the company's free float, right? So again, I think the key lessons is, number one, deciding on the right structure of the placement is very important, whether you do a prospectus with retail, which includes 2 to 3 month preparation, or you do a market ABO or a quick ABO to the building, I think it's important. Number 2, investor engagement, especially where investors are not shareholders of a company. I think it's also extremely important. For example, at NBG, everybody knew the transaction was coming, right? It was the Greek media and the national media, so people putting orders in the book before the launch. In Hellenic Energy, it was the opposite. Nobody expected that Hellenic Energy basically will come with a placement from a large family in the Greek state. So how to utilize different tools, for example, the domestic demand in Hellenic was also very important to drive the book and bring international investors. The third point, since Mr. Kontopoulos also on the panel, is this is a proof that all the global investors can play in Greece. We don't need to change much in the regulation. We don't need basically to reinvent the wheel or create innovative structures. We had 200 lines in the NBG book. Every single investor, like from Fidelity, BlackRock, Capital, all the big names that basically you see investing in Amazon and Google, invest in NBG. So we can talk about dual listing later on, but I think we have nothing to envy from LSE or from other exchanges. Of course, if the transaction is right, the story is proper, and the size is also big, right? But let's be honest. We need 200 million plus offerings, if it's an IPO or an ABO or FMO, to attract the big name.
Thank you, Dimitri. Xenophon, Piraeus Bank has gone through a real flurry of activity, and in the backdrop of what Dimitris was saying about the other systemic banks, I was wondering what feedback you're getting from investors in this process and what you're seeing in terms of liquidity and volume for Piraeus's future plans.
Thank you, Maria Nefeli, and good morning to all. It is in fact that Piraeus has achieved a significant transformation during the past years. Some investors say it is the largest turnaround story in the European space. In record time, the reduction of the NPE ratio from 45% to 5%, while at the same time recovering capital buffers, increasing profitability, cutting costs, and retaining at the same time the leading position in the market, and also customer satisfaction was an accomplishment that has been acknowledged by investors. We have been receiving very strong feedback. Investor demand has increased significantly during the past year. We have seen that being reflected in Piraeus stock price performance, which is the best performing stock in the European banking space, more than doubling this year, while at the same time, most importantly, the increased investor demand has led to a widening in the investor base of the bank. We have seen investors that have not entered the registry for numerous years from not the usual jurisdictions, US, UK, but from Asia, Gulf, and continental Europe. Long-term investors, sovereign wealth funds, have come back to the country, have come back to the registry of Piraeus, and they have acknowledged the accomplishments of the bank. They acknowledge the improvement in the macroeconomic and the general banking environment. And this has resulted in our turnover more than quadrupling from 2022 to 2023. And we believe that the re-rating, along with the improvement and the strong prospects of the Greek economy that our prior colleagues discussed a lot, along with the recovery of the investment grade status and the developed market status, which is the next milestone in the market, will continue to provide strong tailwinds for our stock and for the banking sector overall.
Thank you, Xenophon. Anastasi, we've heard from Xenophon and Dimitris share firsthand experience about investor demand. I wanted to ask you, there is a perception, perhaps unfair, based on what we've just heard, that Greek issuers cannot efficiently access international markets, or perhaps that Greece is a bit too small to attract quality international investors. What do you think about that?
Thank you, Maria Nefeli, and thank you for having me again at the conference. As we heard, we had two very successful transactions, the National Bank of Greece and Hellenic Petroleum. They took place and they had minimal impact in the market despite the size, and in previous years it would have been much bigger impact. At the same time, at Ambrosia, we focused on two transactions on two smaller companies that were on the under surveillance part of the market. And they wanted to raise money. They had turned around already. And in the previous years, it would have been impossible. However, despite these challenges, we managed to attract investors from domestically and on an international level for both Lavifarm and Intralot. Since then, they have enjoyed very, very significant returns, while the companies have restored their presence in the Athens stock exchange. They trade, they're much more liquid, and also their prospects have been restored, and they're delivering their business plans. So we think that success stories like that will entice both companies to raise money, but also investors to follow them and participate. And it's also quite exciting because we see a new generation of leaders that have surrounded themselves with very strong management, and they have both the capacity but also the aspiration to take their companies to the next level. And for that, they need the Athens Stock Exchange, they need international investors and the domestic investor community. So I think the prospects are quite bright, and let's see how 2024 plays out.
Thank you, Tasso. Back to Giuseppe now. Giuseppe, do you think Athens could become an appealing market for IPOs? What are your thoughts on that?
We've come a long way. We believe that, the Athens Stock Exchange can become appealing and attract new IPOs. Obviously, there must be a constant effort on behalf of all parties involved. This can be on the back of improving macro environment, the GDP growth, the volumes that have increased lately, the higher valuations that come with it. So, there are the ingredients to become a more attractive IPO venue. Greek equity has regained investor confidence, as we saw from the NBG transaction. So there is the demand for serious IPOs. We believe that 2024, together with the further divestment of the HFSF on the Greek banks and the Athens International Airport, can help bring more IPOs in the market. Now, as Euroxx, we are working with some corporates as we speak, trying to translate this into IPOs. One thing that we want to pinpoint is that there is this huge part of the Greek economy, which is the Greek shipping industry, and that has not been at any point being represented in the Athens Exchange. Now, there have been ideas and tries in the past, but the thing is that it's not there yet. We've seen Greek ship owners listing their companies in Oslo, in London, in New York, but not in Athens. So we're working on that. Hopefully at some point in the medium term, whether it's 24, 25, we'll have some success on that, and I think that will help the market. And we're pretty confident that, all together we can translate this into success and become a successful listing venue.
Konstantine, Giuseppe's shared his thoughts as chair of Euroxx, Greece's largest independent financial services provider based in Greece. What are your thoughts from a more international perspective about whether Athens could become an appealing market for IPOs?
I think I would start by actually arguing that Athens is an appealing place for IPOs, or more broadly for companies to raise public equity. I think that's the point that all my colleagues so far try to make one way or another. And, of course, the recent NBG deals and Hellenic Petroleum deals have actually proven that point. I think one point that we didn't mention is that the NBG deal not only was a very successful one, but also had an unprecedented demand both from the local investor community, but also the international investor community. We have also seen a number of smaller IPOs and capital raises, the one that Tassos has alluded to, which is extremely encouraging as well, because it's also a sign that the market is recovering, but also the local investor base, both on the retail and the institutional side, is now back on the game. And in terms, of course, of what other things can assist this effort in terms of quantitative criteria and what Athens can do, for example, I think everything seems to be moving to the right direction and actually at a much faster speed than expected. So Yianos, Kontopoulos and his team have been working towards increasing the share dispersion, aligning market regulation with that of our developed market. So a lot of work is being done behind the scenes, and of course Vassiliki at the Hellenic Capital Markets Commission is playing an extremely important and positive role in this effort. So I guess the real question in a way is not how the Athens Stock Exchange can be an attractive place in general for IPOs, but how can specifically be an attractive place for large IPOs that might be tempted to choose a different listing venue rather than Athens. And I think the answer there is getting a little bit more complicated and cannot be seen just in the context of Greece itself, but more as a part of the wider market dynamics. Just to give a very quick context, 2023 was a very interesting year for IPOs. New IPO activity was very subdued globally and even more so in Europe. We also witnessed an acceleration of the theme of companies being taken private and shareholders turning to alternative routes for monetization rather than choosing to list their businesses. The small number of large IPOs was focused more towards the USA, and traditionally large markets like London that was mentioned before have actually become victims of this trend and failed to attract large new milestone IPOs when overall number of listed equities have actually dropped. So in this sense, we can even argue that Athens has outperformed versus what's happening elsewhere. And I think that's, again, a sign of what has been happening and taking place over the last year. So, look, I believe that there needs to be a wider discussion, I think, about re-equitizing public markets, about incentivizing investors to buy public stocks, and creating an environment in which listing a business can actually compete with valuations versus alternatives. But hopefully a lot of the indicators will eventually help towards a direction, as, for example, lower interest rates usually have a very positive impact on new listings. And I think if this is combined with a wider economy that is dynamic, it's stable, and creates companies with a good story to tell, I have no doubt that we'll see many large IPOs taking place in Athens in the next few years.
Thanks, Konstantinos. The regional comparison and context is really important. And I was wondering, Tasso, if, I suppose everything's so positive about the Athens Stock Exchange, we might as well aim even higher. Is there a chance that the Athens Stock Exchange could be a venue for companies based outside of Greece, for example, companies in the region?
That's a very good question, and thank you for bringing it up. I think because of what's happening in the region, and Greece is in a much more stable situation versus other regional exchanges. Geopolitics play a big part of what investors have in mind when they invest. And I think it's the right time to try and attract companies from outside Greece to list in the Athens Stock Exchange. We have a stable currency, stable geopolitics, and we are in a much better position versus other exchanges that have recently attracted a lot of interest. So I think, Mr. Kontopoulos, that's the challenge for all of us, to try and attract companies from outside Greece to contemplate the Athens Stock Exchange as a way to raise money.
Mr. Kontopoulos, do you have any thoughts on that, attracting regional players to list in the Athens Stock Exchange?
I need to start with a programming note. I was just staring at my screen and I remembered what Vassiliki emphasized, ESG, which is important for us. And I think Maria Nefeli next year should do probably a better job on the diversity of this panel. I'm the only one who's not wearing a red tie, so I don't know, we should work on that.
Yeah.
Be careful who you're inviting. So look, on your question, again, I don't think we should jump, and I was just listening to all the participants here, from there's no future, what are you doing, why are you even thinking about Greece, to Greece is, I actually mentioned that in a panel at HSBC, ultra wealth clients in Greece about a week ago. I didn't say Greece is back, I said that last year, I said Greece is rich, because the Oxford English Dictionary announced that rich is the word of the year. And it fit. I think rich is from charisma. So we do things here. But I think that's the important component. When you find yourself into a very difficult situation and your brand is nearly destroyed, people, including your own ecosystem, has very, very negative association with you. You're basically a negative story. So it's very hard for you to imagine something good happening. So what I think we need to do, or at least in my mind, the best strategy for us was to surprise positively. Now, some of those positive surprises will come because you're lucky. As I mentioned before, you're going to do well in a horrible year, you're going to do exceptionally well in a good year, so that's a positive surprise. People start talking about Greece, Google searches increase, especially even in Greek, right? In English, we're already there, but in Greek, the Greeks themselves could not even believe it. Having a company from abroad is definitely a surprise, and it has happened, right? You had Austria Card Holdings, which was based in Austria, right? Do a dual listing in Athens in 2023. Some people notice, not all of them, but the important thing is to, other surprises is to get big items, big floats coming in, and that's where the government helps, right? And you need to convince the government, and with a very, very critical help of folks like Mr. Politis, who I see over there, who are gonna, be tormented for the past 2 years in order to say, yeah, maybe we should float the airport in the Athens Stock Exchange, which by now we keep repeating, but I can guarantee you a year ago that was not the case. So positive surprises, if it comes because we list from outside, great. I mean, I want to start basic, big items, having IPOs, increase the transaction volume, reduce the speed of transaction. There are a lot of elements that people know in terms of how we do things that I think together with the Hellenic Markets Commission we can improve, and we're working on that. So we just need to positively surprise all the time.
Thank you. Dimitri, Yianos mentioned dual listings, and a handful of firms are looking at dual listings. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you think it will affect the growth of the Athens Stock Exchange?
Yeah, look, dual listings is a topic where it's very, there's a big hype in dual listings globally, right? We see many companies, especially doing dual listings from the UK to the US. I advised a company a few weeks ago doing a delisting and relisting from Italy to the US, so it's a big topic. Right? Now, if I'm a Greek company, I will be very careful because I think for the next 3-4 years, the party is in Athens, not in London, for many reasons. Yeah, for many reasons. Investment grade, DM status, politics, growth. But basically, a successful dual listing or relisting, I think, should have 2-3 components. Number one is mainly the strategic angle. So if you're a Greek company, operations in the US, you want to do M&A in the US, yes, makes sense maybe to list dual listing in the US because there's a strategic nexus. Secondly, we've seen in the past a lot of basically companies in Europe going to the US, especially in the tech sector. So if there's a sector angle, you're a tech company, you want to get, the valuation arbitrage versus Europe, or you want to attract, all the investors who invest in tech, for example, mostly in the US. So if there's a sector angle, I would say yes. But if there's no strategic angle, there's no operations on the country, there's no sector angle, what will happen is you do the dual listing and the liquidity of the stock will come back to Athens. So we've seen this happening in the past few years. Companies in Greece, because of the crisis, moved out of Athens to do the second listing, and actually in the end, all the trading flows and investors actually are Greek. So I'll be very careful on if you're a Greek company, if you don't have sector or strategic basically angle on dual listing, to go in that route.
Thank you. That's very helpful, especially for those in the audience who are considering this in the next few months. Giano, mindful of time and my achievement of having made 6 fantastic men stick to their times, could you give us a bit of a preview about what changes we expect in the Ethics Code and how these will affect the market? I know you're still waiting for Vassiliki's approval, but if you could give us a couple of highlights, and then I'm going to ask Xenophon to close the panel by commenting on how he views these changes.
All right, thank you. So a lot of that process was to explain things and exchange ideas together with the Commission, but also with the ecosystem itself, right? So we spent a lot of time discussing things with people in the market, listed companies, but the main premise here is to, again, increase the attractiveness, the richness of our market. So part of it, I think, is to be a market, which means that you need to trade. You need to have the opportunity to come in and out, so you need large companies, right? So in your main market, you shouldn't have a lot of very small companies. They should be actually on your alternative market. So you should take care of that, but also improve the attractiveness of your main market. So increase the minimum size for firms to enter the market, increase, importantly, the float component of markets. There is, unfortunately, I realized by going back to Greece that there is a tendency in all markets, right? There are exceptions to the rule, but somehow the exceptions to the rule become honey to the bees, right? They go straight there instead of using them very, very sparingly whenever it's needed. So toughen up those rules. Make sure that it's there only for exceptional circumstances, that when you go into a situation where you're under supervision, you cannot say under supervision for 50 years. And so on and so forth. We increase the quality of the market. But for me, the most important one is the tradability and the float. That's why the program with the banks in Greece, which they are actually selling, the Hypertamio is actually unloading, it's divesting. That actually increases the flotation of the market. And ultimately, that does not only help the market, but it serves a parallel purpose, which is with respect to the developed market status. That's one of the quantitative requirements that we need to fulfill. So we cannot control it, but we can influence it. And then for the SME market, the alternative market, we have applied to make it an SME growth market, which is under MiFID II European specification that has some very interesting characteristics. We actually have a very strong pipeline on the SME market, which have led to a number of very successful stories in the course of the last 10 years for firms that have transitioned from the alternative market to the main market with exceptional results. So those are some of the jewels of the Greek market. And let me start with the word jewel.
Thank you, Giano. Xenophon, as the only representative of a Greek-listed entity, what are your thoughts on the upcoming Apex Code changes?
We believe that these are important initiatives that will help the market overall, widening the investor base and widening making more easy, more comfortable, and more accessible to a wider number of investors is extremely important, and we have seen that also with our own stock. It's not something that will be done only by the Athens Stock Exchange. We all have to do our part in making known the companies and promoting our stock exchange in the market. It's very important to increase the size of the market. The initiatives taken also by the state to place their stakes in the Greek companies in the market is very important. Ourselves, we believe that the HFSF, the placement of the HFSF stake on Piraeus Bank will be a catalyst for the stock going forward also, having seen also the successful implementation for MBG. It's very important for the market to achieve the developed market status. We have seen that developed markets trade at 40 to 60% pricier than emerging markets, with a close to 20% lower volatility overall. So it's another milestone that we want to achieve and will help the market overall.
Thank you. Thank you, Xenophon. Thank you all.
Great job, Maria.